In the second bond hearing for George Zimmerman, and listen to this, the judge has set bail for Mr. Zimmerman at $1 million. This latest development comes on the heels of a newly released medical records from the 28-year-old's first doctor's visit the morning after he allegedly shot, well, he did shoot 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. The only question is whether he did so in self-defense and should be exonerated. So the first doctor's report being revealed, and it's detailing the full extent of the injuries Mr. Zimmerman sustained during their alleged, why do we keep saying alleged? During their fight. There was a fight, there was a shooting, there was a death. The only question is whether it was justified by self-defense, and these medical records may shed light on that, Trace Gallagher.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to the medical records in 1 second, Megan, but I want to do this breaking news on the bond you were just talking about, and maybe you can help me out with this because it's awfully strange. The judge, Kenneth Lester, issued a $1 million bond, but in his order submitting or setting bail, he says that it appears that George Zimmerman was getting ready to flee the country. The judge says with that valid passport in the safety deposit box, along with that $135,000 that he never disclosed, the judge says in the order, and I'm quoting here if I can put this on the screen, although there is no record of flight to avoid prosecution, this court finds that circumstances indicate that the defendant was preparing to flee to avoid prosecution, but such plans were thwarted. We have called Zimmerman's attorney, Mark O'Mara. He is now planning a statement. We will get that hopefully in the minutes to come. We'll share that with you. Now, on to the medical records. The medical records, 3 pages long, very interesting about his physical and as well as his mentally handling the shooting. First, the physical part. As we know, he had a broken nose, 2 cuts to his scalp that did not need stitches. He also had 2 black eyes, and he complained of pain to his neck, his nose, and his head, but he refused to go to the hospital. Now, remember, he claims that Trayvon Martin punched him in the face, jumped on top of him, and beat his head against the concrete. Now, the report did not recommend x-rays and said there was no head trauma, and he was referred to an ear, throat, and nose doctor, but he declined to go. Now, the only reason he went to the doctor in the first place was to get a note so he could go back to work. Prosecutors say this exam shows that the injuries do not back up his claim that he endured a life-threatening beating. Now, a report also notes that George Zimmerman is obese. 5 feet 7.5 inches tall, 204 pounds. He is 4.5 inches shorter than Trayvon Martin, but outweighs him by 45 pounds. Now, he was on meds to both elevate his mood as well as to calm him down. The physician's assistant says Zimmerman claims that every time he thinks about the violence, he gets nauseous. She went on to say, and I'm quoting here, given the type of trauma we discussed, that it is imperative he be seen with his psychologist for a full evaluation. And as you might imagine, both sides in this case would use these medical records for their benefit because this is going to be a big part of the trial.
That's right. There's a lot to pick apart on both sides. Although that is an eye-catcher. They described the man as obese. Really? I don't think most people looking at George Zimmerman think he's obese. But that's a side point. As for your point about the bail, it's interesting, Trace, if the judge clearly thought that Zimmerman was a flight risk first time around, and yet he grants bail a second time around, you know, one can only speculate that he believed now that he, the judge, has control of that passport and not Mr. Zimmerman, and he's